Hey up, welcome back. Nothing too controversial today, just a little old tale for your edification and possible amusement. But before we crack on, a little bit of admin. So first of all, my website, if you get a chance, www.thebingleywheeler.com. You can catch up with me on Instagram at the Bingley Wheeler, and you can catch up with me directly via email at thebingleywheeler@gmail.com. So that's that out the way. So today I just thought, rather than get embroiled in subjects that of late have inadvertently become a little bit more controversial than they had any need to be, all of which said, the vast majority of comments have been very, very positive, supportive, and largely in agreement. And a lot of people saying it's a balanced point of view that you put forward, and just a couple of people or so taking issue, which is fine. So I'm just going to take you back to 1986, and some of you might not even have been around in 1986, but in 1986 I was sort of in my third year as a young constable in the police here in the UK, and I was expecting to stay where I was for quite a few years at that point. I was stationed in Bradford, and it never occurred to me at that time that I'd be moving upwards, sideways, or whatever anytime soon, because most people didn't, to be fair. You used to have to get about 10 years under your belt to do anything, you know, specialise or go for promotion or whatever. That's how it was back in the 1980s, with one or two rare exceptions. But that was certainly the case where I was working. So, 1986, so I joined in 83, so 1986, 3 years servicing. Not a lot were happening back then. I mean, we'd just got over the miners' dispute, hadn't we, in sort of 1985. The miners' dispute ended, and that was a big thing for the police, particularly the Northern Police Forces back then. And things were starting to settle down, and there wasn't a right lot happening. I was living with me mum and dad back then. I was living. We had a little terrace house in a part of Bradford called Bradford Moor, and I was living there with my mum and dad. And I were on day off. I were on a midweek day off, because obviously we worked most weekends, so you used to get the odd, most of your days off, in fact, fell midweek. So we're on day off, and I remember the phone rang. And I answered the phone, and it was the divisional chief inspector at work. So I thought, oh my God, what have I done? Oh, and can I say, for the record, I'm not gonna name the gentleman, but an absolutely superb police gaffer, a brilliant boss. Not a man to cross, not a man to make an enemy of, but if you grafted, kept your head down, did your job, behaved professionally, he would support you all the way. And I loved him to bits. Well, not literally, of course, but you know what I mean. He was a leader, a man to be admired, a fantastic role model. Anyway, so it were him, and I thought, well, if the inspector had rung me up, I'd have been thinking, crikey, what have I done, you know? Chief Inspector, what's he doing ringing me at home? Anyway, he says, right young man, have you got a motorcycle licence? I said, no sir. Why? He said, well, I'm setting up a team of police motorcyclists, road traffic officers in Bradford, and I'd like you to be one of them. And I was dumbstruck. I was absolutely dumbstruck, because for a cop back then with less than 3 years servicing, to be offered a job in traffic, and to boot a job on a motorcycle, a police motorcycle, and to boot at the place where I was born and bred, and where I'd already served 3 years. Absolutely unheard of. So it quite took the wind out of my sails to start with. Anyway, when I regained my composure, I said, no, sorry sir, I don't have a motorcycle licence. He said, well, can you get one? I said, well, I can certainly try, yeah. He said, right, and this would have been, let me see, this would have been late June 1986. And he says, right, well, the advanced motorcycle course starts end of August. So you've got like till end of August. So 7 weeks to get your motorcycle licence. I had a full car licence, obviously. So back then anyway, there were a part 1 and a part 2 to pass your motorcycle licence. Part 2 were your CBT, like you have now. And part 2 was basically the on-road test. Well, of course there were no examiner on a motorcycle then with you know, bike-to-bike communications or anything like that. There were none of that. It were a fellow with a clipboard that used to hide behind buildings and in public toilets and all sorts, and spring out on you as you rode past with his clipboard and make you do an emergency stop. Or it were quite comical really, the way it played out on the ground, this little bit of theatre past part 2 of your motorcycle test. Honestly, you couldn't script it. So I said, yes sir, I'll do my best anyway. So I very quickly, because back then your full car licence acted as a provisional licence for a motorcycle. So anyway, I went out and I bought this clapped out Suzuki 100cc. It were a shed. It were absolutely banjaxed for this bike, but it were cheap as chips. And how it had ever got through its MOT I don't know, but it came with one. And it looked like it had been made from old lawnmower parts and bits of spare rubber, you know. But anyway, it went. So I took some lessons with a local instructor, and then all I ever did, every spare minute of my time after I'd passed my part 1, the CBT, every spare minute of my time I used to go out on this clapped out old thing with rubber bulb for horn, and that's how bad it was. And I knew that the testing site that I would take my road test on, I knew where it was exactly, in Bradford. You're in the middle of Manningham in Bradford. And so every spare minute that I had, I'd be up there on this clapped out old thing, just going round and round in circles round this area. Because of course with the examiner being on foot with his clipboard and his flat cap and his dirty raincoat, as it transpired, of course there's a limit to how far that fella could get to see how we were getting on. So I knew there was a certain limited geographical area in which I could reasonably be assessed. And they didn't use binoculars or out like that, you know. It was a case of peeping round corners and all sorts. All right, cloak and dagger, like a spy movie. Anyway, so that's what I did. And then I managed to get my part 2 test in just a few days prior to the start date of this police motorcycle course. And of course I'd already got my uniform, you know, my marked up motorcycle helmet on with checkered band and police on, and all my gear, my Lewis leathers, top quality Lewis leathers, boots, gloves, fluorescent coat, Sam Brown belt that we used to wear back then, all of that sketch. I'd got it all together, so everything were hanging on this test, and I were a bundle of nerves. And on morning at test day, we're absolutely pissing it down. you know, sod's law, it were absolutely chucking it down, middle of summer, and it were chucking it down, bouncing down, and all I had were a pair of crimpling slacks and an old padded jacket, which were about as waterproof as a pair of wide denier tights. And so anyway, I put my mail placer on, obviously, and I rode up to test site, and this fella texted me through usual thing, can you read that number plate at 67 feet, and all a few questions on highway code and whatever, and said, right, here's your route, and I'll be popping out from time to time. Absolutely pissing down. So I thought, this will be good for emergency stop, won't it, on this old thing. Borderline tyres, knackered brakes, ABS were the thing of science fiction movies back then. But anyway, so I went on this route that he'd given me, and it kept popping out from behind trees and billboards and other bits of street furniture. And then he jumped out and waved his clipboard at me for emergency stoplight, and I just did the best I could with. I thought if I skid, because if you'd locked up at all, you fail the test. Anyway, I didn't lock up. I did it. I thought it took a little bit longer than I should have done to come to a halt, but I didn't lock it up. And anyway, I got back and he said, yeah, I'm pleased to tell you you've passed. I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely over the moon. It was one of those euphoric moments in life that you always remember. Anyway, so that were that. So I ended up on the Police Advanced Motorcycle course, 4-week intensive course at the Force Driving School. Now, it won't be lost on you here, and with retrospect, it's something that I should have been more alive to than I was you can't really just pass your civilian test, never having ridden a big motorcycle, and then go on a police advanced motorcycle course on a fully marked up, fared up Blues and Twos BMW R80 and expect to fare very well. But anyway, I rocked up. And we did, you know, we did the initial training for a couple of weeks, and we were split into two groups. I think there were 6 or 7 of us, and there were one instructor with one group and another instructor with another group. And my group was just me and one other lad, another officer, who were a far more experienced and far better motorcyclist than I was. And the instructor, who was obviously a highly qualified, you know, top of the pyramid trained motorcycle instructor, but a police officer, and he was on his bike. Actually, it was a Norton Interpol 2 with the rotary engine, and about as reliable as a French car was back then. But when it were up and running, it was a rocket ship. And it'd leave us, the students, on the BMW R80 RTPs, as they were back then, leave us absolutely standing. Yeah, so the 3 of us would every day go out, and we'd be out like 8-9 hours training. And I was struggling. I had a particular mental block with bends on steep downhill gradients, and 1 or 2 things like that. I don't know why, but you know, getting used to a heavy, fully fared, fully equipped BMW R80 after pootling about on this 100cc Suzuki, it was a big gap to have to bridge in such a short period of time. Albeit that by then I got my own sort of decent sized motorcycle. I got a Yamaha XZ 550, but I'd only had like a few days riding on that, so I wasn't quite on point, if you see what I mean. Anyway, middle of week 3, it was starting to come together. You know, penny was starting to drop with the roadcraft, you know, the police system of riding, and some of the principles of advanced riding, like extended positioning for right hand bends and the racing line and things of that nature. penny was starting to drop, and it was starting to become a little bit more cohesive, a little bit more coherent, a little bit smoother, a little bit more polished. And I started to get a little bit more complacent. And on the 17th of September 1986, we were training in Derbyshire, and we were on a road called the A6 going into a little village called Doveholes. And the other student was leading, the instructor was behind him assessing, and I was tail end Charlie at the back. And we were going into this sweeping right hand bend. I'll never forget it, into this sweeping right hand bend. A fair bit of speed, 60-70 mile an hour. And I was obviously following the instructor, and for whatever reason I lost my line into the bend completely. I got the line completely wrong into this right hand bend, and the curb were getting closer and closer and closer. And of course a modern motorcycle, when you're cranked over and you're on the apex of a bend, if you anchor the brakes it holds its position, but back then no. We're talking about a C Charlie registered, and a brand new, as it was, 1986 BMW R80 RT. Anchored brakes on them when you're cranked over, and they just stand up. So sure enough, the bike stood up. It stood up, went straight into the curb and threw me off. And I'm going down the road on my backside at about 60 mile an hour. Not a problem, because I got these state-of-the-art Lewis leathers on, so I'm actually all right, other than a slight warm sensation in my derriere. And then next thing, there's this bloody articulated lorry, 38-ton truck, coming towards me, opposite side of the road, and I'm not kidding you, my entire life flashed before me. And it does. It takes place in ultra slow motion. And I must have missed it by about a foot, if that. And anyway, I span to a halt, and I span to a halt in the middle of the road. And I remember thinking for a split second, wow, I've got away with this. And next thing, bang, bike had followed me down the road and landed on top of me. This thing, this 250 kilos of bike, landed on top of me. And broke my left leg in 4 places above the ankle. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. So I'm there, laid in the middle of the road, full uniform. And I thought, I wonder how this is going to play out. And all of a sudden, there's people crowded round me, members of the public, trying to help me. And there wasn't a lot they could do, really. The bike were a complete write-off. Frame were bent, and I'm there, and I must have laid there for 20 minutes before the other two had twigged that I wasn't with them, and came back. Well, the story that unfolds from here on in is a little bit of the stuff of legends, and was the start of the end of my police motorcycle career. So, stick around for part 2.